Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor is the reason the term double champ exists. Before him, nobody had ever held two UFC titles at the same time. People had moved up and won belts in different weight classes. Penn did it, Randy Couture did it, but nobody had ever walked into a fight holding one belt and walked out holding two. McGregor was the first. He won the UFC Featherweight Championship at UFC 194 in December 2015. 13 seconds. That is how long it took him to knock out Jose Aldo, a man who had not lost in 10 years. Aldo threw a left hook. McGregor countered with a straight left. Aldo was unconscious before he hit the canvas. The shortest title fight in UFC history. The most dominant featherweight in the history of the sport ended by one punch. 11 months later at UFC 205, in November 2016, McGregor walked into Madison Square Garden and fought Eddie Alvarez for the UFC Lightweight Championship. He dropped Alvarez 4 times in 2 rounds. He finished him by TKO in the second. The featherweight champion was now the lightweight champion at the same time. 2 belts, 1 fighter. McGregor never defended either one. He was stripped of the featherweight title and the lightweight title eventually went to Khabib, but the historical record cannot be changed. McGregor was the first man to hold 2 UFC titles at the same time, and the reason every fighter on this list got compared to him for years afterwards. Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier was an Olympic wrestler before he ever threw a punch in MMA. He represented the United States at the 2004 Athens Games. He finished 4th at heavyweight. He was a 4-time NCAA Division I All-American at Oklahoma State University. By the time he started fighting professionally, he was already one of the best wrestlers on the planet. He won the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship at UFC 187 in May 2015. He submitted Anthony Johnson by rear naked choke in the 3rd round. He defended that belt 3 times. Then, in July 2018 at UFC 226, he moved up to heavyweight and fought Stipe Miocic, the longest reigning heavyweight champion in UFC history. Cormier knocked him out in the 1st round with a short right hand on the break. New heavyweight champion. Still the light heavyweight champion. Double champ. The thing about Cormier is that he became champion in 2 divisions while being 5 feet 11 inches tall. He gave up reach and height to almost every heavyweight he ever fought. He gave up reach to almost every light heavyweight he ever fought. And he beat them anyway because his wrestling was unstoppable, and his power was real once he learned how to use it. He lost the heavyweight title back to Miocic in their rematch at UFC 241. He lost the trilogy. He retired in 2020. But the run from 2015 to 2019 is one of the most dominant runs by any fighter in UFC history. Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes is the only woman in UFC history to hold 2 titles at the same time. She is also one of the very best fighters the sport has ever produced regardless of gender. She won the UFC Women's Bantamweight Championship at UFC 200 in July 2016 by submitting Miesha Tate with a rear naked choke in the 1st round. Then she defended it against Ronda Rousey at UFC 207 in December 2016. 48 seconds. That is how long it took her to end the Rousey era. She walked Rousey down, hurt her with the first clean punch, and finished her against the cage before a full minute had passed. The biggest star in the history of women's MMA was retired in less than a round. She defended the bantamweight title 5 times. Then in December 2018, at UFC 232, she moved up to featherweight and fought Chris Cyborg for the featherweight championship. Cyborg had not lost a fight in over 13 years. She was considered the most dangerous female fighter who had ever lived. Nunes knocked her out in 51 seconds. 51. The most feared woman in MMA history finished in under a minute. 2 divisions. 2 belts at the same time. Nunes defended both. She is the only fighter in UFC history, male or female, to defend titles in 2 different weight classes during the same reign as double champ. That is a record nobody else on this list has. She retired in June 2023 after beating Irene Aldana. Her record is 23-5. She is the greatest female fighter who has ever lived, and the argument is not close. Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo won an Olympic gold medal in freestyle wrestling at the 2008 Beijing Games when he was 21 years old. He is the youngest American to ever win Olympic gold in wrestling. He then walked away from wrestling and started fighting MMA. He won the UFC Flyweight Championship at UFC 227 in August 2018 by split decision over Demetrius Johnson, ending the longest title reign in UFC history. Johnson had defended the belt 11 straight times. Cejudo beat him in the rematch. Then at UFC 238 in June 2019, Cejudo moved up and fought Marlon Moraes for the vacant bantamweight title. He got hurt early. Moraes was wobbling him with leg kicks and punches in the 1st round. Most fighters would have folded. Cejudo did not. He survived the round, came back in the 2nd, and finished Moraes by TKO in the 3rd. He was the UFC flyweight and bantamweight champion at the same time. He defended the bantamweight title against Dominic Cruz at UFC 249 in May 2020, and then immediately retired in the cage. He was 33 years old and walked away holding holding the belt. He came back in 2023 and lost 2 fights, but the original retirement and the double champ status remain. Cejudo is an Olympic gold medalist and a 2-division UFC champion. There has never been an athlete with that combination of achievements in combat sports history, and there probably never will be again. Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira is the strangest double champ in UFC history because he barely had a career when he did it. He started fighting MMA late. He had a handful of fights, and inside 3 years of joining the UFC, he held belts in 2 divisions. Nobody climbs that fast. Nobody. He won the middleweight title at UFC 281 in November 2022 by stopping Israel Adesanya in the 5th round. That was already a story on its own because Adesanya had beaten him in kickboxing twice years earlier, and Pereira walked into MMA and took his belt. Then he lost the rematch, moved up to light heavyweight, and at UFC 295 in November 2023, he knocked out Jiri Prochazka to win the light heavyweight title. 2nd division, 2nd belt. Still basically a beginner on the mat. The thing that makes Pereira terrifying is the left hook. It is one of the most lethal single weapons the sport has ever seen. He does not need to out-wrestle you. He does not need to grind you down. He needs one clean shot and the fight is over. He knocked out Prochazka. He knocked out Jamahal Hill in the 1st round. He flatlined people who were supposed to expose his ground game before they ever got the chance. Most double champs are complete fighters who mastered every phase. Pereira is the opposite. He is a kickboxer with a hammer in his left hand who learned just enough MMA to get the fight where he wanted it, and it worked all the way to 2 UFC belts. That is not supposed to be possible. He did it anyway. BJ Penn. BJ Penn was a 2-division champion. Before being a 2-division champion was the dream every fighter chased. He won the UFC welterweight title at UFC 46 in 2004 by submitting Matt Hughes, one of the greatest welterweights in history, with a rear naked choke in the 1st round. Then he dropped down and won the lightweight title at UFC 80 in 2008 by finishing Joe Stevenson. 2 belts, 2 weight classes, done before most people even understood how rare it was. What made Penn special was not the moving up and down. It was how natural he looked doing it. He was the first non-Brazilian to win the World Jiu-Jitsu Championship at black belt level. His ground game was generational. His boxing was sharp and clean. At lightweight, he was nearly untouchable. He defended that belt 3 times against Sean Shirk, Joe Stevenson, and Kenny Florian. And in that stretch, he looked like the best fighter on the planet pound for pound. The welterweight title was the harder one. He was the smaller man fighting bigger men, and he still took the belt off a legend. That is what a real double champ looks like. Not a gimmick, not a money grab. A man who was genuinely elite in 2 weight classes against the best the era had. BJ Penn at his peak was one of the 5 best fighters alive. 2 belts in 2 divisions proved it. Georges St-Pierre. Georges St-Pierre is the cleanest double champ on this list. No controversy, no asterisks, just dominance across 2 weight classes, separated by years and a level of skill nobody could touch. GSP ruled the welterweight division like nobody before him. He won the title, lost it to Matt Serra in the biggest upset in UFC history, then avenged it and reeled off 9 consecutive title defenses. 9. He beat everyone. Josh Koscheck, John Fitch, Thiago Alves, Carlos Condit, Nick Diaz. He took down elite wrestlers at will and outstruck pure strikers. He landed more takedowns than any fighter in UFC history. He was the most complete welterweight the sport had ever seen, and it was not close. Then he left at the top. He walked away in 2013 as champion, healthy, undefeated in his last 12 fights. Most fighters who do that never come back the same. GSP did the opposite. He returned in 2017 after 4 years away, moved up to middleweight, and submitted Michael Bisping with a rear naked choke at UFC 217 to win a 2nd title in a 2nd division. Think about that. 4 years off, up a weight class, against a sitting champion, and he choked him out. He became a 2-division champion in his comeback fight after retiring as the greatest welterweight ever. GSP did not chase the double champ status. It came to him because he was that good. That is the difference between him and almost everyone else who tries it. Jon Jones. Jon Jones is the greatest fighter who has ever lived, and the double champ status is just the final stamp on it. He ruled light heavyweight for over a decade. His record is 28-1, and the one loss is a disqualification for illegal elbows in a fight he was destroying. He has more title fight wins than any fighter in history. He beat every great light heavyweight of his generation, and most of them were not close. He beat Mauricio Rua for the title at 23 years old. He beat Daniel Cormier twice. He beat Alexander Gustafsson, Glover Teixeira, Lyoto Machida, Rampage Jackson, Vitor Belfort, Chael Sonnen, Anthony Smith, Dominic Reyes. He defended the light heavyweight belt more than anyone in the division's history. For 10 years, nobody could solve him because there was nothing to solve. He did everything at the highest level and adjusted to every opponent in real time. Then he left the division he conquered and went up to heavyweight. At UFC 285 in March 2023, he fought Cyril Gane for the vacant heavyweight title. Gane was a slick mover who had never been taken down in the UFC. Jones took him down in the 1st round and submitted him with a guillotine choke in just over 2 minutes. The best light heavyweight ever walked into a new weight class and finished an elite heavyweight in the 1st first round like it was nothing. That is what makes Jones different. The other men on this list earned their double champ status the hard way, and you respect every step of it. Jones made the second belt look like a formality. He moved up to the biggest division in the sport and made a top heavyweight tap in 2 minutes. The greatest of all time in 2 weight classes with one loss that was never really a loss. Islam Makhachev. Islam Makhachev is the most recent man to join the double champ list. He won the UFC lightweight championship at UFC 280 in October 2022 by submitting Charles Oliveira. He defended that belt against Alexander Volkanovski twice, against Dustin Poirier, and against Arman Tsarukyan. Then, at UFC 322 in November 2025, he moved up to welterweight and fought Jack Della Maddalena for the welterweight championship. He took JDM down repeatedly, controlled him on the ground for 5 rounds, and won a unanimous decision. New welterweight champion. He vacated the lightweight title to make the move, but for one night he held both. His record is 28-1. His only loss came in his 3rd professional fight more than a decade ago. Makhachev is a product of the Dagestan system. He trained alongside Khabib Nurmagomedov for over a decade. His wrestling is the same kind of suffocating wrestling that defined Khabib's career. His sambo is elite. His top control is the best in the sport. He has not lost since 2015. He is the lightweight champion in everything but name, and now he is the welterweight champion as well. He is the 7th man to join this list and the most dominant grappler currently competing. Ilia Tuporia. The chase? Ilia Tuporia is not yet a double champ, but he is the most likely active fighter to join the list. He won the UFC featherweight championship at UFC 298 in February 2024 by knocking out Alexander Volkanovski in the 2nd round. He defended it once against Max Holloway, knocking him out in the 3rd round. Then he moved up to lightweight and won the vacant lightweight title at UFC 317 in June 2025 by knocking out Charles Oliveira in the 1st round. He is now the lightweight champion. He is 17-0. He has called out for a return to featherweight or a move up to welterweight to chase a 3rd belt. He has not yet held 2 titles at the same time, which is why he is not officially on the list. But he is the fighter most likely to join it before this decade is over. If he goes back down to featherweight while still holding the lightweight title, he becomes the 8th double champ in UFC history. If he goes up to welterweight and wins, he becomes the 1st fighter in UFC history to hold titles across 3 different divisions during the same career run. Tuporia is the future of this list. Everyone else on it has already made their mark. The pattern: there are 7 men who have officially held 2 UFC titles at the same time. Conor McGregor, Daniel Cormier, Amanda Nunes, Henry Cejudo, Islam Makhachev. That is 5 names because 2 of those names belong to women's MMA pioneers and the other 3 are men. The full official list is McGregor, Cormier, Nunes, Cejudo, Makhachev, plus the original BJ Penn and Randy Couture before the simultaneous hold definition existed. The pattern is clear. To become a double champ, you need to be elite at one thing that travels across weight classes. McGregor had power and timing. Cormier had wrestling. Nunes had power and finishing instinct. Cejudo had wrestling and pressure. Makhachev has wrestling and control. The weapon that wins you the 1st belt has to be the same weapon that wins you the 2nd. That is why the list is so short. Most fighters have something elite that works in their division and falls apart against bigger or smaller bodies. The men and women on this list have something that does not care about the size of the body across from them. That is what makes a double champ. Not power alone, not wrestling alone, not skill alone. A weapon that scales. That is every UFC double champ explained.